we arrived at Château de Purnon 5 years ago, she was sad and neglected and on the brink of being lost forever. But over this time, we have made some incredible discoveries. Now, these discoveries are not only helping us in the restoration of the chateau and the chateau grounds, but they're also giving us an invaluable insight into the lives of those that lived here in the 18th and 19th centuries. And today, I'm going to share with you 10 of my favourite things. Let's go have a look. Amongst many of the discarded items up in Purnon's attic was a huge collection of 18th and 19th century travel cases. And this really allows us to travel through time through travel luggage, because some of the luggage was made for travelling on the back of a cart, so with horse and cart. And then later when train travel was introduced, you can see the change in the luggage to that era. So there's a few pieces in here that I absolutely love. I love this hat box over here. It still has its travel labels on the side. It still has its original key, but when you open it up, it has the most beautiful red velvet lining still in place. The other hat box that I really love is actually this one here. And when you open it up, it actually has 3 positions for hats, which can be moved to alter the space depending on the size of the brim of the hat. But you could slide up or slide down each of the 3 hat holders to manage the space for the brims of the hats within this case. And this is really quite an interesting look at how important hats were, because look at this huge case, and just for traveling with 3 hats, it's really quite extraordinary. It's not so heavy. The other piece of travel luggage in this room that I really love is this one here. But if you have a look inside, it has fabric coated drawers that would have neatly held all the contents in here. And there are 2 drawers which are still in quite good condition, with their straps to hold everything nicely in place. And this luggage is a really interesting step back in time to travel in the 18th and 19th century. And this collection of luggage that we discovered here at Purnon is one of my favourite things. When Château de Purnon was first constructed at the end of the 18th century, all the beds in the principal rooms were crowned by a ciel de lit, or in English we call it a bed canopy or baldaquin. And when we arrived here at Purnon, up in the attic amongst lots of discarded furniture, we found many of the original 18th century bed canopies. Now, these would have been handcrafted by the carpenter who created a lot of the furniture for the chateau, but none is more spectacular than this one here. So originally this baldaquin would have had a lot of fabric draping around it. It would have had large curtains that draped across the front and then dropped right down to the floor and could be closed to keep the family member warm and also give them some privacy. But what do we love the most about this? Well, firstly, we love that it still has its original 18th century wallpaper on the side panels. This is a really stunning floral design that has its neoclassical frieze still in place. Look here, we can see that the crown of the canopy is covered in a cotton. It's a cotton that's printed with an Indian floral design, but the most exciting discovery that we made here is that when they covered the crown, they used right up until the end of the roll. And what that means is that we can exactly date the year that this fabric was printed, but also the exact location of where it was printed. Look here, it's marked Rouen, 1780. So we know that the interiors of the chateau were completed in 1785, and so this fabric had been printed 5 years earlier, and this is one of my favourite things. Now, this is certainly not a building that I want to spend a lot of time in. As you can see, it is in a terribly precarious state. Where are we? We are in the Western Outbuilding in the Tack room. And as many of you know, the Western Outbuilding suffered some major structural issues over many decades before we arrived. A large support structure sits behind this building to keep it stable for the time being. But I really love how time has stood still in here. And there's something I want to show you. So all around us are items of discarded tack, and as a horse rider, this is something that I really love. There are blinkers, there's so many bits, there's leather straps of all sorts of kinds, there's girths, there's bridles, there's saddles, there's a cupboard full of medication, and this really reminds us of the domain's hunting past. The huge stables would have housed all the horses that were used for the hunt. They hunted in the large forest in front of the chateau, but also we are surrounded by tack for the agricultural horses, so they would have been using horses to manage their agricultural fields. But there's something in here that I particularly love. Yes. It's this. This is a very small child's stirrup, and the reason that I love it is it says to us that whilst horses here were being used for the hunt and used to plough and manage the agricultural fields, they were also being used recreationally by small children on the domain, and I think that is really sweet, and this is one of my favourite things. Well, no doubt by now you are starting to get a sense that many of my favourite things were found discarded in the attic. And this particular item is no exception. This is a silk garment that we found in a large armoire or a large wardrobe in the billiard room, which is the central room of the attic. You may remember that when we arrived here, one of the very first things that we had to do was to appoint a heritage architect who could guide us through the restoration. And once he was appointed, one of the first things that he asked us to do was to clear out the attic. The attic had been used for storage, and over centuries, a lot of items had been discarded up there. But this is an incredibly delicate, tailored, hand-sewn silk garment that has the most beautiful work. So it was obviously custom made for, you would have to assume, a family member that was living here at the chateau. It has boning on the inside. On the right-hand side, there is actually a cotton pocket, and then it has the most wonderful sleeve shape and this incredible garment made with so much care, so much skill, speaks to us of an era that doesn't exist anymore, and it certainly is something that is far from practical in the lifestyle that we live here now at Purnon, amongst the leaking roof and the dust and the debris. But it does show that at one point in time that life for the family members here was a very different lifestyle to what we are living here today, and this incredible garment is one of my favourite things. But whilst we're talking about the attic, I want to take you up there to show you something else. All around us here at Purnon, we are surrounded by the names of those that have come before us, the artisans that worked on Purnon, the domestic staff that lived and worked here, their names etched into the soft tuffeau stone or scribbled into the sides of cupboards. But none is more beautiful than this piece of graffiti here. So this says, "Moi j'ai donc l'honneur d'écrire sur cette cheminée." It's me that has the honour to write on this chimney, le 17 avril 1832, so the 17th of April 1832, Eugene, which is obviously our author's name, and he goes on to say that he is the best artisan in his company and that he thinks of love, qu'il pense à l'amour, which he spells incorrectly, l'amour, qu'il pense à Mademoiselle, who thinks of Mademoiselle Anna, and then he's written under Anna, bonne d'enfant. So in order to not be confused with another Anna that may have been working here, this is the Anna that was the nurse that looked after the children, qui a tant de mérite, who has plenty of merit, et tant de qualité, and a lot of qualities. So let's hope that Anna got to read this beautiful love letter that Eugene left on Purnon's chimney for her. It's hard to know what kind of artisan he was. He wrote it in 1832, so he obviously didn't work on the initial construction of Purnon. There is the outline of a roofer's tool that sits over this graffiti, and so it is possible that he was a roofer, although to me it looks like this has been drawn later. It sits over the actual graffiti. But actually there he is there again. Eugene, 1832. I haven't seen that before. I would say he's definitely a roofer because here he has etched in his roofer's tool. So there we go. I'm not sure why he was working here in 1832. Maybe they had to do some roof repairs in that year. But let's hope that Anna loved Eugene as much as he loved her and that they lived happily ever after. But this wonderful, heartfelt piece of graffiti is one of my favourite things. After 5 years of being surrounded by the dust and noise of this restoration, you would think I would be used to it, but this week I finally lost my cool because the stonemasons are working on these windows here, which go into here. This is the Grand Salon, the bibliothèque, the antechamber, and it is covered in dust. So in a moment of absolute desperation, I wrote to the team at iRobot, SOS, I need help, I can't deal with it any longer, and they have sent me a lifesaver. Well, with the cleaning of these principal rooms now completely under control by our Roomba, I have to say this guy has definitely become one of my favourite things. Well, while we are here in Purnon's incredibly clean Grand Salon, here we also have something that I absolutely love, and this is an 18th century privacy screen that we found abandoned in one of the chateau's outbuildings. Now, this screen could have been used for multiple purposes. One is to create smaller spaces for warmth. So here on the ground floor, our ceiling height is 4.5 metres, and it would have been very difficult to heat in winter. Well, it still is, but even more so in the 18th century. And so these privacy screens could have cordoned off areas to make smaller areas which would have been easier to heat. The second purpose of this screen could have been to create modesty for the noble family members. Remember here, the family and their domestic staff lived very close together, quite often in bedrooms right next to each other. And so the privacy screen would have given the family members some modesty for dressing or bathing behind. Or the third reason is actually purely aesthetical. And this screen has the most wonderful 18th century hand-painted wallpaper on it. And I love how you can see all the imperfections of the hand painting. It has a heron who has caught an eel in a pond, and then it has beautiful floral bouquets. And this wallpaper is actually part of the Purnon Papers wallpaper collection that we have completed with Farrow and Ball. It is the namesake paper. It is absolutely spectacular, and this is without doubt one of my favourite things. But we just touched on the lives of domestic staff here, and so let's go and have a look at another one of my favourite things. Well, this incredibly atmospheric small staircase is actually the staircase that led up to the room for the domestic staff member that looked after Adelaide Achard de la Haye. Now, Adelaide was the only daughter of the Marquis and the Marquise who constructed Purnon, and we've covered her story in a previous video where we went on a journey of discovery because we had very little information about her. But this staircase goes up to a small room and it still has the original bell. Let's see if we can get up there. So the staircase has a small window to give light to it that actually gets light from the room below. This really gives me the heebie-jeebies. There's a lot of cobwebs. But the bell that Adelaide would have used is still here today. And I tell you, I really wouldn't have liked to have had to clamber up these stairs multiple times a day. But these reminders of how this house functioned during the 18th century with the noble family and the staff that looked after them is one of the most interesting things about this property, and this is one of my favourite things. We are down in the basement of the chateau, and this is one of the rooms that would have formed the original storage, the original 18th century food storage for the kitchen. And the reason we are here is because of this item. This item is a suspended cage. It is covered on 3 sides with a wire mesh, and in the center inside the cage is a disc, and around that disc there are hooks. Well, what is it? In French it's called a garde-manger, and it would have allowed the cheese to refine and mature whilst being well ventilated. But why is it suspended? Well, having lived here for 5 years now, we know what it's like to battle rat infestations and mice plagues. And so having the garde-manger suspended would have ensured that those pesky little rodents were kept well away from the family's cheese. And this is one of my favourite things. This is the Chateau's potager or vegetable garden, and as you can see, recent storms have really caused a huge amount of damage here, but we have a lot of peaches. They're not quite ready yet. Let's hope we can get to them later, but there's a lot of apple trees, there's obviously peach trees, there's cherries, there's plums, there's quince, there's kaki, so lots of fruits still up here on some very old trees, but there's something I wanted to show you up here. We've always known this building to be referred to as the Pavillon de Potager, so essentially the gardener's shed, and it made sense to us with its location. It's right on the edge of the potager, but it was a bit of a mystery. Have a look at this building. It's got wood panelling, it's got ornate plasterwork. It just seemed too over the top for a gardener's shed. Now recently our architect completed a diagnostic study of the parks and gardens, and we discovered the most extraordinary thing. Tim shared this with you in last week's video of his 10 favourite things, but you may remember that he mentioned that the original 18th century plans that we'd found here at the chateau, we thought that they had never been executed. Well, our architect found the exact opposite. The chateau's original 18th century plans were executed, and this Pavillon de Potager actually was a folly that was at the end of one of the parterres. So a huge parterre that ran the entire western width of the chateau, right past the chateau, right up the length of the current park, here to this folly. And so as the domain's immense and ornate gardens started to no longer be managed, nature started to take over, and this little folly was turned into the gardener's shed. Now we can see behind me that there's an opening here that has been blocked in, and that makes complete sense because that is actually the side of the pavilion where the huge parterre came up to. And so for us to now understand that this wasn't originally a very ornate gardener's shed, it makes much more sense sense to us that it was actually this beautiful folly right on the border of the immense gardens. And today we can still enjoy its Roman columns, its very decorative features, and it gives us this chance to reflect on how ornate those original 18th century gardens must have been here. It must have been a sight to behold. But for today, this is the final of 10 of my favourite things here at the Chateau. Well, thank you for joining us again this week on YouTube. Tim and I appreciate your support and shared passion for our project here. But remember, as always, if you would like to follow the restoration project more closely, we post frequent updates on Instagram. We post an exclusive weekly video for our YouTube and Patreon members. Otherwise, just hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and we'll keep you updated here.